Nigeria is a country that knows coups. For decades, soldiers once decided who ruled the nation. Governments rose and fell at gunpoint. But in 1999, everything changed. Nigeria returned to democracy. Since then, presidents have been chosen by the people, not by force. So when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu took office, many Nigerians believed the era of military takeover was long gone. But was it really over? Or was something dangerous growing in the shadows? Tonight, we begin an investigation into a hidden plot, a plot that almost changed Nigeria's future. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the truth you are about to hear is not always shown on the news. President Tinubu inherited a nation under pressure, rising cost of living, insecurity in many regions, anger, frustration, and fear among ordinary citizens. Everywhere you looked, people were asking questions. Is the government doing enough? Is Nigeria moving in the right direction? These same questions were also being asked inside powerful places, including within the military. The Nigerian armed forces are officially loyal to the Constitution. Their duty is to protect democracy. But history tells us something important. Coups do not start on the streets. They start in quiet rooms. They start with conversations. They start with people who believe they know better than everyone else. Sources familiar with security investigations say that sometime after the new government settled in, unusual conversations began. Not public conversations, not official meetings, private discussions between a small group of officers. Officers who were unhappy, officers who believed Nigeria was losing direction, officers who quietly asked a dangerous question: what if civilians can no longer lead this country? Another question followed: what if the military must step in again? These questions may sound simple, but in Nigeria they are explosive. At first, these talks were dismissed as frustration. People complain all the time, but investigators later noticed a pattern. The same names kept appearing. The same phones kept connecting. The same small circle kept meeting. This was no longer ordinary talk. It was becoming organized, structured, planned, and someone at the center of it all stood out. A senior military officer, highly trained, highly trusted, a man who had spent decades inside the system. To the public, he looked loyal. To his colleagues, he appeared disciplined. But according to intelligence sources, his private words told a different story. Here is the most important question. Was this officer simply complaining? Or was he preparing something far more dangerous? Another question: how many people were involved? 5, 10, 20? And the most frightening question of all, how close did Nigeria come to waking up under military rule again? These are the questions we will investigate in this series. What we can confirm is this: security agencies began to quietly pay attention. Not because a coup had already started, but because small warning signs were appearing. Unusual movements, unexplained meetings, officers traveling without clear orders, encrypted messages. None of these alone proves anything, but together, they form a picture, a troubling picture. Let me ask you something. If someone was planning to remove a government, would they announce it on television? Of course not. They would hide. They would pretend. They would smile. And that is what makes investigations like this so difficult. Because the people who plan coups rarely look like villains. They look like patriots. They claim they are saving the country. But history shows us something else. Coups rarely save nations. They destroy them. Across Africa, coups often begin the same way. Economic hardship, political tension, military dissatisfaction. Then suddenly, a radio announcement, a suspended constitution, soldiers on the streets. Could Nigeria have been heading toward this again? In the next chapter, we will examine how this alleged plot moved from talk to planning. Who was recruited? How trust was built? And how a single mistake began to expose everything. If you care about Nigeria's democracy, if you believe civilians should choose their leaders, then this story concerns you. Please like this video, subscribe, and share it with others, because what almost happened in Nigeria could happen again. We revealed how dangerous conversations began, not in public, not in press conferences, but in silence. Now we go deeper. Because talk alone cannot overthrow a government. People must be recruited. Trust must be built. Loyalties must be tested. Every coup starts with one key step: finding out who is willing to cross the line. According to security sources, the senior officer did not approach people randomly. He chose carefully. Only officers with a history of complaining. Only officers who felt ignored, sidelined, or frustrated. The approach was slow. Casual conversations, friendly visits, private dinners. Nothing about overthrowing government at first. Instead, the same question kept appearing. Are you happy with the way things are going? Most people answered cautiously. Some changed the subject, but a few said something else. They said no. Those were the ones marked. Investigators believe a small inner circle began to form. Not dozens, not hundreds, just enough to test loyalty. Each person in this circle was expected to do two things: keep silent and identify others who might agree. This is how secret networks grow. One person becomes two, two become four, four become eight, quietly. At this stage, no clear date was set. No official coup plan was written. But something important happened. The conversations changed. They moved from complaints to possibilities, from possibilities to methods. Questions like, if the military stepped in, would Nigerians support it? Which units would obey orders? Which commanders could resist? These are not normal questions. These are operational questions. Investigators say communication became more secure. Regular calls reduced. Messages became shorter. Some officers switched to encrypted messaging apps. Why does this matter? Because people who believe they are doing nothing wrong do not hide their conversations. Secrecy suggests intention. Sources describe meetings held late at night, not inside official offices, not during duty hours. Locations varied, sometimes a private residence, sometimes a quiet hotel room, sometimes a remote office after closing time. No phones on the table, no written notes, everything spoken, everything memorized. This is classic underground behavior. Ask yourself, why would trained officers behave like this? Why avoid records? Why avoid witnesses? What were they afraid of? The answer is simple. They knew what they were discussing was illegal. They knew it was treason. Another disturbing discovery. The group was not only discussing removal of the president, they were mapping power. Who would control which region? Who would secure which base? Who would speak on radio or television? Who would announce the takeover? These are not dreams. These are assignments. But here is where the plotters made a critical mistake. They assumed everyone they spoke to was on their side. They assumed shared frustration meant shared loyalty. They were wrong, because inside their growing network was someone who did not agree, someone who was listening, someone who was afraid. This officer believed in the Constitution. He believed in civilian rule. He believed Nigeria had suffered enough under military governments, and he faced a terrible choice: stay silent and protect himself, or speak up and risk everything. What would you do if powerful people invited you into something illegal? If saying no could make you a target, would you walk away or would you report it? This single decision would determine the fate of the entire plot. Quietly, carefully, the officer contacted a trusted superior. Not to accuse, not to create drama, but to share concerns, names, conversations, patterns, enough to raise alarm. This was the first crack in the shadow network, the first leak, the beginning of the end. We will reveal what happened after intelligence agencies received this information, how surveillance began, how evidence was gathered, and how the plotters unknowingly walked into a trap. Please like this video, subscribe, and share it, because the deeper we go, the darker this story becomes. By the time the first warning reached intelligence agencies, nothing had exploded. No tanks on the streets, no gunfire, no public crisis. But sometimes the most dangerous threats are the quiet ones. Because silence can hide preparation, and preparation can hide disaster. When the concerned officer shared what he knew, investigators did not rush to make arrests. They did not confront anyone. They did not alert the suspects. Instead, they did something far more powerful. They watched, silently, carefully, patiently. Phones linked to the named officers were flagged, movements were logged, meeting patterns were studied, travel records were reviewed. Nothing was done openly, because if the plotters sensed danger, they would scatter. They would destroy evidence. They would deny everything. So the agencies waited. What they discovered was troubling. Some of the same officers were meeting more frequently. They were traveling to similar locations. They were spending long hours together without official reason. On the surface, everything looked normal. But underneath, a pattern was forming. And patterns do not lie. Investigators began building a network map. Who spoke to whom? Who met who? Who introduced who? Slowly, a structure appeared, not random, not chaotic, organized, purposeful. This was no longer just angry talk. This was coordination. Let me ask you something. If a group of people had nothing to hide, why would they keep their movements secret? Why would they avoid official channels? Why would they meet only at night? What would you think? Plainclothes officers began discreet observation, not to provoke, not to interfere, only to confirm. Every new piece of information was compared with the original tip. Names matched, locations matched, conversations matched. The whistleblower's story was proving accurate. Then came the turning point. Investigators intercepted a conversation that changed everything. Not a joke, not a complaint, but a clear discussion about timing, not a date, but a window, a period when the government would be distracted, a period when response could be slow. This was the first real sign of operational intent. From this moment, the case moved to a higher level. Senior intelligence commanders were briefed. The presidency was quietly informed, not publicly, not in speeches, but through secure channels. The instruction was simple. Proceed carefully. Avoid panic. Protect democracy. At the same time, loyal units were subtly repositioned. No announcements, no dramatic deployments, just routine-looking movements. To anyone watching from outside, nothing had changed, but inside the system, a silent defense was forming. This is something many people never see. Coups are not only stopped with guns, they are stopped with intelligence, with patience, with people who refuse to betray their country. The officer who reported the plot did not become a hero overnight. No medals, no interviews, only fear. Fear of being discovered, fear of retaliation. But he stayed quiet, and he stayed firm, because he believed Nigeria was worth the risk. By now, investigators were certain. This was not imagination. This was not misunderstanding. A real attempt was taking shape. And the question was no longer, is there a plot? The question became, when do we move? Why they chose a specific night, how arrests were planned, and how the alleged plotters were caught completely off guard. Please like this video, subscribe, and share it, because what stopped this plot may surprise you. By the time investigators finished gathering evidence, there was no longer any doubt. A group of officers had crossed from talk into preparation. The question was no longer whether to act. The question was how. Because arrest too early, and you miss key players. Arrest too late, and the country could fall into chaos. Timing was everything. Senior security chiefs met behind closed doors. Phones left outside. No assistants, no recordings. Only the most trusted officials in the room. They reviewed names. They reviewed movements. They reviewed communications. One conclusion became clear. The network was large enough to be dangerous, but still small enough to stop quietly. A coordinated operation was planned. Multiple cities, multiple targets. Same night, same hour. The goal was simple. Remove the brains, cut communication, prevent resistance, end the plot before anyone could react. Why not arrest them during the day? Because daylight brings attention, questions, crowds, leaks. Night brings silence. Night brings control. Night brings surprise. As ordinary Nigerians slept, special teams moved into position. Plain vehicles. No sirens, no flashing lights. Each team carried sealed orders. Each team knew only its own target. This reduced the risk of leaks. One by one, doors were knocked. Officers were taken into custody. Some were shocked. Some were silent. Some tried to argue, but none resisted. They were caught unprepared. Their phones were seized. Their laptops were seized. Documents were collected. The shadow network collapsed in minutes. Perhaps the most striking detail. No shots were fired. No bases were attacked. No units mobilized. The plot ended quietly, just as it had begun, in silence. Think about that. A plan that could have pushed Nigeria into crisis, stopped without a single bullet, not by force but by intelligence, by patience, by loyalty. After the arrests, investigators worked through the night. They compared seized devices with earlier surveillance. Names matched, chats matched, meeting records matched. The evidence confirmed what had been suspected. This was not imagination. This was real. By morning, key figures in the network were gone from their posts. To the public, nothing dramatic was announced. No emergency broadcast, no nationwide address. Life went on. Most Nigerians never knew how close the country had come to danger. Authorities made a deliberate choice. No public spectacle, no political drama, just internal discipline, quiet investigation, firm control. Because sometimes stability is protected best, without noise. We will examine what this failed plot means for Nigeria, what lessons were learned, what risks still remain, and why democracy must never be taken for granted. Please like this video, subscribe, and share it, because this story is not just about what almost happened, it is about what must never happen again. The plot failed. Nigeria did not wake up to soldiers on the streets. The Constitution was not suspended. The president was not removed. Democracy survived, but survival does not mean safety, because history teaches us something important. The danger did not disappear. It was only stopped. Many Nigerians will never know the full details. No long court sessions on television, no dramatic confessions, no daily headlines, just silence. And maybe that was intentional, because sometimes governments choose quiet stability over public shock. But we must still ask questions. Why were some officers willing to betray their oath? Why did they believe removing an elected president was acceptable? What frustrations pushed them to that point? These questions matter, because ignoring them does not make them disappear. Nigeria faces real problems: high cost of living, unemployment, insecurity, corruption, slow development. These realities create anger. Anger creates frustration. Frustration creates openings for dangerous ideas. Coups often grow from these conditions, not because they solve problems, but because they promise simple answers to complex issues. But simple answers are usually lies. Military rule does not create prosperity. It does not create justice. It does not create unity. It creates fear. It creates silence. It creates cycles of violence. Nigeria has lived this story before, and it was painful. Decades of military government did not make Nigeria great. They delayed progress. They weakened institutions. They taught people to obey instead of participate. Democracy, though imperfect, gives citizens something powerful: a voice, a choice, a chance to change leaders without bloodshed. Let me ask you, would Nigeria be better today if soldiers were still in charge? Or is our future stronger when civilians lead? These are not abstract questions. They define the direction of the nation. Most Nigerian soldiers are professionals. They respect the Constitution. They risk their lives fighting insurgency. They protect communities. They deserve respect. The actions of a few should never define the many. But vigilance is necessary. This failed plot sends a message to politicians, to soldiers, to citizens. The message is simple. Nigeria is changing. The old days of easy coups are fading, but they are not completely gone. Democracy survives only when people defend it. Defending democracy does not always mean carrying weapons. Sometimes it means speaking up. Sometimes it means voting. Sometimes it means refusing to participate in wrongdoing. Sometimes it means reporting what you see, like the officer who chose conscience over comfort. You may never command an army. You may never hold high office, but you still matter. Your choices matter. Your silence or your voice matters. That is how nations rise or fall. What almost happened in Nigeria is a warning, not a prophecy, a warning that must be taken seriously, because the price of freedom is not paid once. It is paid every day, through responsibility, through courage, through participation. If you believe in Nigeria's democracy, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this story. Let more people understand what is at stake. Because history is not only what happened, it is also what almost happened.